the theme for this year's retreat, or convention rather, was evolutionary love for today's world. And it's really interesting to hear about how each one of the speakers or the workshops was centered around that idea, and it went in so many different directions. So this morning, I'd like to share with you some of the big ahas and moments that are from the different speakers, and then also intersperse it with some questions and answers that you might have about things about God or science of mind or whatever it is. And there are some file cards over here. So if you have a question you'd like to ask me, you can fill it out the file card, and Michael will sort of feed them up here to me. There's some pens there as well, so you can do that. But one of the things, though, that was really amazing to me about the convention, the Evolutionary Love, is that our center, the Centers for Spiritual Living, has evolved from a U.S.-centric organization. It was started in Los Angeles by Ernest Holmes, and now it is worldwide. And not only does it mean, well, as far as how big we are, there's 243 centers like ours, but there's a total of 407 organizations. So besides the full centers, there are focus ministries where you've got one minister that's doing something unique that doesn't necessarily have a building. There are study groups and that are, just starting up, people that don't have a minister, but they want to learn about science of mind. And then there are teaching ministries where you have a practitioner that might be teaching classes or doing things like that. So a total of 407, and they are in more than 40 countries throughout the world. So it's really quite a reach that we've extended to. But the first speaker that they had was a woman named Blanca, and I forget her last name, but she's a minister, new minister, that's from Brazil? Mexico, from Mexico. And so she spoke in Spanish. And so everyone else that was at there, whether you were listening online or if you were there, they gave us some headsets so we could hear in Spanish. So we got in English. So we got the experience of what it's like to be a Spanish speaker at an English convention, right? So we got to hear it all, and we got to, some of us, my headset didn't get to work, so I missed the first part of her talk while I got it fixed. And, all those kinds of things that go into the experience. So but it's really not just thinking, oh, we know the truth, we're going to translate it so you people in Spanish can understand it. It's really bringing in the awareness of all people into our total awareness, right? And so it's we talk a lot in today's world about DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and that's very controversial in some places, but that's the reality of the world. White Anglo-Saxon males are just a small portion of the total population, and we definitely we do not have a monopoly on God, because God is everything and all people and all things. And so this is really going beyond tolerance to true acceptance. It's gone from just excluding everybody to including them, but not just including them, but to realize that we are truly all one, right? The Dr. Edward Edward Viljoen. He is originally from South Africa, but he's been in California and CSL Santa Rosa for many years, but before he became the spiritual leader. So he's ending his third year. And when he got elected in February of 2020, a month later we were in COVID. So he had a very unusual time to be the spiritual leader. But he's an amazing man, and he sticks to the principle, that rather than worrying about the form, because that could really throw you off. He had this whole program planned and didn't get to do a whole lot of it. So he just had to be fully present at all times. And so the question he keeps coming back to is how, and if we want to have a world that works for everyone, what are we contributing? Each of us as the global movement, as an individual center, and as an individual, right? That's the question to ask. And so when we think about, if we're struggling, how do we get people to come in and find this this best kept secret that people to come to Carnelian Bay to discover us here, and so he's thinking it's not just talking about it that's going to get us where. It's about demonstrating that this stuff works, demonstrating that it makes a difference in people's lives, demonstrating that this idea of a God that's in everything really works for everyone. And they're so much so that they're going to say, I want some of that. I think a lot of the people that are in this center that have been here for a long time, they have had some kind of, they didn't start out with their lives being just wonderful and perfect and everything going along rosy. They've gone through some kind of challenge in their life and gone from the darkness into the light, as they were talking about in the music this morning. And so, because when you've had that transformation, when you've found some ideas that really help us connect with spirit, then we want to remember that. And sometimes, and I know I've gone through a lot of times in my life when, I was, you want to give and, being a practitioner and then a minister, all these giving. But there were some times in my life when the energy that I had was I could get up and get my kids fed into school and then pick them up. And that was about all I could do after my first husband passed. And so I needed someone to give to me, right? And so we're part of the expression of the world. And this also is about, Dr. Edward talked about each one of us are leaders. When in a traditional religion, one of the things that people like about it is that, okay, these are the rules. You follow the rules, and you get to go to heaven. You're not going to go to hell and be in the burning fires of hell for the rest of eternity. You're going to go to heaven, and so it's very simple. So in Science of Mind, though, we talk about we have work to do. We have to listen. We have to understand. We need to speak our word, and we are the co-creators of our life. All right? And so, and the part of the trick is that it's done unto you as you believe, and so we have to be really careful about what we believe, right? Because it's not just what we say, it's what we believe in our heart of hearts. Like if we say that, okay, I deserve to have a great job and good income and great relationship, and my children will be perfect, and life will be good, and it will only snow in the days when I want to stay home, but there'll still be plenty of water. I mean, all these things, but what do I really believe? Right? What do I really believe? What is, in fact, we talk about race consciousness. What is going on in the world that people in general believe? Because they're all co-creating too. So how do we shift it? We shift it one by one. We will lift, we will rise together by working together. And it's not about changing what's going on out there. It's about changing our own selves. And that's where it starts, right? And then when we change us, then we attract something different around us. Where people have to, when we're different, then people can't treat us the same way because they don't get the same results anymore. So it sounds complicated, but it's very simple at the same time. So it's really interesting. That takes me off into some of some of the ideas. Maybe we should move into. Should we have a question, or have more about the? Right. Is there are there any questions yet? Do we have one? Oh, Michael has a question. Okay. Okay. All right.
I'm wondering, what is the meaning of being spiritual without being religious?
Okay. So, when we talk about, there's in religion, there's a lot of these rules of religion, and every religion started with one person that had this experience of God. And it's an amazing experience. When we have a direct experience of God, we realize that we are one with God, that we are a beloved creation of God. And so, but whatever that religion was that this person created, they they set down what they learned in that experience as rules. And people follow that rules because other people want the same, whatever that person had, man or woman, then I want some of that. And so they'll copy it. And so when they start copying it, it's like um, it becomes rigid. It has to be exactly that way. And but when we go back to that experience of God, it's transformative. I mean, I know for me, when I get into that place of that cosmic consciousness, there, there's not any rules. There's not any words even. There's not any, if you really get into the oneness, there's not even, um, the music, the art, and there's not even form, right? There's just being. And so when we come, it's like translating. So when you're in this world of just being, it's like you know everything all at once. But because there's no separation, it's hard to explain everything all at once, right? It's oneness. And so as we come out of that oneness, that's when we get kind of an arm's length difference to try and describe what it is, right? And so the and that's we end up with the rules and think that, well, just because it was this way once, it's going to be that way all of the time for everyone, and that's not true. And so when we talk about being spiritual without being religious, that's what we're talking about, is that for us it's about that personal experience of God. And all that we do is about that. And so whatever use we have, it's about um, communicating with God. And the and it's about we talk about practicing the presence. So when we meditate, we're sitting in the presence with spirit. And and we can pray, there can be words, there can be chanting and music or art or whatever the way we express it, but it comes back to that presence of God within us, right? And it's like the simplicity of knowing God, right? We can come up with all these rules and spiritual mind treatment or what have you, um, but in some ways it comes back to Jesus said, "Except they come unto me as a child, they shall not know the kingdom of heaven," and that's what he's really meaning. It's like a child, they know that they're free and loved and life is good, right? And so we're really all trying to come back to that experience, right? And there's a wonderful poem that one of the ministers shared with me, and I want to share with you. It's just really says this so well. And it's by a woman named Chalin Haken. Here it is. And she grew up in Hood River in Oregon, and she's a mystical poet, she calls herself. And so she lives with an open heart, and she keeps a pen and notepad near her all the time, because when it comes, she just has to write it down as fast as she can, because when the moment's gone, it's gone, So she has to capture it. And so in 2021, she's about 30ish, something like that. She published 2 books of poetry in a year, because it just comes that fast and that easily. So this is from her first book, Susceptible to Light. The poem's called "The Worst Thing." The worst thing we ever did was put God in the sky, out of reach, pulling the divinity from the leaf, sifting out from the holy from our bones, insisting God isn't bursting dazzlement through everything that we've made. A hard commitment to see as ordinary, stripping the sacred from everywhere, to put in a cloud man elsewhere, prying closeness from your heart. The worst thing we ever did was to take the dance and the song out of prayer, made it sit up straight and cross its legs, and removed it of rejoicing, wiped clean its hip sway, its questions, its ecstatic yowl, its tears. The worst thing we ever did is to pretend God isn't the easiest thing, in this universe, available to every soul and every breath. And that to me is about what it's about to be spiritual. And that's something, regardless of whatever background people have, that's something that we can all relate on. It's about that experience of the presence of God, whatever we call God. Right? So, one of the things that, in coming back into to the conference, we have a committee called the Global Service Committee, and they've been working on getting these centers set up around the world and supporting the ministers and practitioners and new members that are there, and and really it's gone into these 40 countries. Probably 2/3 of those have been in the last 5 to 10 years, I think, probably. And so there's a lot of things going on. There's a woman minister named Reverend Martha Quintana, who used to be at CSL in Santa Fe, and she took it on for leadership for a couple of years, and she's done amazing things. All the things that they talked about, and they're getting books translated into Spanish and Russian and Swahili and French and and I think Norwegian, lots of different things. But they, when we talked about, I talked about how shifting to this different perspective expands how we understand. And so there was a minister there from Kenya, and so her native tongue is Swahili, and so when you're in a foreign language, there are always words that never translate into English or vice versa, and so the for the word of self-love, they had trouble understanding why Americans would not love themselves. Where was self-compassion? I mean, there's a special word in Swahili that talks about self-compassion, and it's just who they are. It's like fundamental. It's like breathing to them, right? And so they really couldn't understand it. And so this is something where it's like we work so hard to have self-love in America, right? And it's something out there that we really need to go. We have to be better, and no, you are perfect just as you are. You are loving and loved right as you are. And so it's about discovering who you are. Next month we'll be talking about discovering who we are. We don't need to be anyone else. This is who we are. Another thing that that was different for this student or this minister was when she was teaching the classes. We want to go and get all our books and read the books so we know what the answer is to the questions, and we know, what Troward said and what Emerson said and what Ernest Holmes said and Raymond Charles Barker and Emma Curtis Hopkins and some of the newer writers and what have you. But she had a student in her foundations class, that's the beginning class, and whenever she would ask a question, he would just go, and he would come out with this amazing answer, because he was going straight to source, right? And we all have that connection. I mean, that's the direct presence of God. So, these are teaching things. These are teaching tools to get us to that awareness. And it's like learning to drive a car. When you start to learn to car, you learn what the rules of the road are. You learn what all the different things happen in the car and how to do them. And you learn, when you're going to make a turn, you slow down a little bit so you're not going too fast, and you turn the car, and then you straighten out, and you watch the cars around you. If you're changing lanes, you got to turn your blinker on, all this stuff, right? And so if you're driving in snow, that's a whole new experience. And so we go through all these steps in our head, but eventually we find that we've gone 10 miles and haven't thought about one thing what we were doing to drive, because it became so automatic, right? So we were thinking about all these other things. But it's the same thing. We go through the steps until they become ingrained in us. So just to kind of focus on some of these things happening worldwide, there's a lot of different conventions that are going to be happening. That if you want to go to convention, you can spend your whole time doing that. But there's some really wonderful ones that you might want to go to. So, for instance, CSL Kenya, they are sponsoring a world convention in February of 2024. So they're inviting everybody to come to Kenya. And so besides the conference, it's about 4 days, 3 or 4 days in Nairobi. Then they have a before conference, which is you can go on a safari and see all of the elephants and learn all about their experience with a spiritual group doing it. Well, yeah, yeah. Yeah. This is pre-conference, and then after the conference, they're going to take you around so you can learn about what Kenya is really like, what it's like to live there, and so experiences the little villages and the cities and learn what that is about. So that's one option. Another one is the Parliament of World Religions. So this is it's going this August 2023. It's going to be held in Chicago, and this is where people come. You've heard about interfaith and so forth. Well, people from different faiths around the world all come together in different places, and it's been in Australia and the Vatican and all different kinds of places every few years. But how is science of mind in there? A lot of times when you go to a hospital and you try and check up what religion are you, it's really hard to find anything that applies if you're belong to a Center for Spiritual Living. But there are 5 different New Thought proposals, sessions that were accepted to be part of it, and on different topics. And so they're working together, different New Thought groups, to try and be more cohesive and recognizable, right? Because there's a lot of similarities with even with the differences. And so this group includes the Centers for Spiritual Living, Unity, Divine Science, Agape. They broke off from us, and then the Universal Foundation for Better Living, or UFBL, which was Johnny Coleman broke off from Unity way back when because she felt that Unity at the time was too racist. So it's so all of these things that have happened, and now we've got this diversity within New Thought, but it's all basically New Thought. So that's an exciting one that you might want to go to, and hear what how New Thought is being perceived by the rest of the world, and at the same time learn about all the other religions of the world. Another one is there's a SOAR convention, which is the Centers for Spiritual Living, and this is going out into nature and really like the meeting that we went to. A lot of it was business about running a center and being a better minister or a practitioner or what have you, but this one is about personal growth and being in nature and just spending time in spiritual community. And so this happens every year, and this year it's going to be every other year. Okay. And so it's going to be held August 8th through 11th, and we're going back to Asilomar. There used to be 2 weeks at Asilomar every year, and that was always sold out. And then, in recent years, it wasn't selling out, and they increased the price when they upgraded the facility. But now everybody's really excited about going back to Asilomar. So we might want to have a group that goes down there from our center. And so the registration is not open yet, but August 8th through the 11th. And it's a beautiful place right on the shore in California, near Pacific Grove, Monterey Peninsula. Just a beautiful place. So that's a great experience. So, and one other thing, while we were here, one of our, Brian and Linda Zimmer, Michael and I got to spend an afternoon with them and went out to see their beautiful new home in Windsor, and hear the whole story about how it was created, and they're both doing really well, and Brian's gotten through all of his medical treatment, and he's really back on his feet and really energetic and back to being Brian, and it was great to spend that time with them. So we know that prayer works, right? Okay, another question?
Yeah, there's a question from Shirley, and then I have a quick question for you. Shirley's question is there a heaven? Is there a hell?
Ah, this is a big one, and this is one of the ones that people coming from a traditional Christian religion often have trouble with getting to this. It's like we say that we say that heaven and hell are a state of mind, right? There is no um, hellfire and brimstone kind of thing that's going on, and the and we also say that there's no evil, right? There's only good. If everything is God, right? If everything is created by God out of itself, there's no place where God is not. And therefore, there can't be a hell. Why would God want to put part of itself in hell, right? And so when we can take the power of science of mind and creation and create something that is like hell, but it's a misuse of the power. You know, it's like nuclear power. You can use it to create energy and power things. You know, whatever we need in the community. Turn on the lights and run the factories and do whatever. Or you can use it to create a bomb. Right. So it's a misuse that we do as humans. It's not part of the eternal. And in fact, if there was something that was like that, then it would be about self-destructing. Right. So we want to be always creating something new rather than destructing, having it fall apart and eat away at the whole. Right? There's not this push me, pull me back and forth all the time, and so there isn't that hell. But then what is heaven then? And this is the amazing freedom that we're given. So, whatever, when we're aspiring that we want something in our life, God always says yes. God is always ready to give us whatever it is that we ask because that's its nature. And so if we think that our lives are only going to be, difficult and a drudge and we'll just barely get by, well, God will say, okay, that's what you want. You got it. But if we think that, no, I am this beautiful creation of God, I've been created to do great things. Whether it has, it's just taking care of my family or it's transforming the world or anything in between, right? It's sharing who I am as a part of God. And so everything that I need to do that is provided. And having relationships, when I am part of a healthy, loving relationship, when I love myself as I am, then I'm going to attract someone that matches that idea. And that's a heavenly relationship, right? And so, it all comes with our belief. And so heaven is a state of mind. And so when we have that state of mind, when we know that this is God wants to give us the best that it has to give, wants to give all of itself, and that's the heaven. And so sometimes it takes us a while to move from where we are to getting to that point, but that is the intention, right? Right? You said you had another question,
Oh yeah, just if we have time.
and we'll take one more.
Yeah, if you can briefly explain the relationship between the A-center spiritualism and the centered spiritualism and what is known as home office. What is that home office to us, and of course, therefore, to all the other centers of spiritualism?
Well, the in a lot of churches, different organizations, they have in what they'll call a home office. It's kind of a top-down structure, and the Catholic Church is the ultimate, right? And so, but they'll have the structure at the middle, and then they will dictate what the rules are that everybody needs to follow. They will own all of the buildings, and they may financially support all the different centers and the ministers and so forth. And so they can even decide that this minister, or they need a new minister in this center, and okay, now it's time for this minister to move over to another center, and we'll put somebody new in here. And they move people around and make all those decisions from the top down. Not in our organization at all. It is a very horizontal type organization. It's very independent, and so everyone is a leader, including every member of the congregation. It's like we try to make decisions by consensus because we believe that everyone's voice should be heard and is an important part of the whole. And so because of that, the home office, or whatever we call the centers of spiritual living, it's an umbrella organization that includes all of these groups, and there are common teachings and books and classes that are put out. But the hub is more of a support. It's kind of like the heart supporting the body, and so they were, they've had some, as everyone has had lower income at the center level, then that means that they have lower money going into, we don't receive any money from the home office. Instead, we give portion of our tithe to the home office to support them. And so creating the curriculum and the spiritual leader that goes out representing the centers in the world, and dealing with training ministers and practitioners, and all of those kinds of things. And so they serve the rest of the organization, right? And so it keeps the information going in and going out. It helps keep the ministers in different centers and connected with each other, so we know what's going on. And so there's some things, like there's an ethics committee. When something happens that someone gets out of line, they will address it, and for the good of the whole. But it's really a service to the organization. And so I was really amazed with some of the decisions they had to make this year that cut back on, with they have fewer they because there was less income, they've had to cut back on their staff, and they consolidated, for instance, the spiritual leader position with the field leader position. The spiritual leader kind of dealt with everyone out there in the world and sharing who Science Mind is, and then the field leader was in charge of working with the centers. So they combined those two positions in one to save the money, and they're just doing more with less. And really, but they're really hanging tight with what is the principle? Why are we here? What is most important? And so, when you go back and do that, sometimes you eliminate some stuff. Well, this is something the centers could do, or we really don't need this, or this is getting really complicated. How can we simplify this? And so it really gets people to go back and do that. So it's an amazing organization that we have, and it's but it's also, when you've got this kind of flat organization, an idea can come out of and it goes throughout the world, right? So it's very quickly. So it's there's fewer filters than there would be if everything's got to go up to the top and get approved, and then maybe it might make down. Instead, it just goes, right? And that's the way God is anyway. So, well, that was that was interesting. So, did you like the idea of having the Q&A? It was sort of totally. I planned stuff, and that was only half of what I talked about. So, okay, I got plenty for next time. So, well, thank you all for being a part of this. And so, but now we come to our prosperity time.